West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I played that last little montage because if anyone can relate to and understand Nancy Pelosi's life as a full-time hate object of the right, it would be you. And so I wonder if you can just, tell me how the attack on Paul Pelosi struck you, and what did it tell you about the state of the right in this country and the hate toward a powerful woman?
Well, I think your question kind of answers itself, Joy. There's always been a streak of violence, of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, as you said. But I think what we're seeing today, and it has certainly been thrown into very high relief by the horrific attack on Paul Pelosi, is not just an aberration where one or two people or a small group engage in that kind of violent rhetoric and urge people to take action against political figures like her, like me, like others. We're seeing a whole political party and those who support it, those who enable it, those who run under its banner, engaging in behavior that is so dangerous and I find, frankly, disqualifying for people who are running for office. This midterm election, we've seen a lot of ads by Republicans running for everything, touting crime. Crime is the issue, but when an 82-year-old man is attacked by an intruder in his own home, they don't seem to be too bothered by that because that person is married to the Speaker of the House who's of a different political party. I just want your viewers, and really I would like every American, just to stop and think about that. This is the kind of violent rhetoric that leads to violent action, that props up authoritarians, and that's unfortunately what we see the Republican Party today supporting.
And to your very point, right? This attacker allegedly confessed to police that his plan was to kidnap Paul Pelosi, to wait for Nancy Pelosi to come home, and then to hold her hostage, to break her kneecaps if she didn't tell whatever truth it is he thought he could get out of her, and then use her as a symbol to everyone else as to what would be in store for them if they didn't behave as his, sort of right-wing conspiracy theory mind believed they should. I mean, if you think about it, this was a kidnapping plot that was directed at the sitting Speaker of the House. And yes, her husband is the victim of it because he happened to be her husband and happened to be home. And yet, you saw the person who now solely owns Twitter, which, like it or not, is still a giant global public marketplace of ideas, promote lies about what happened to Paul Pelosi, promote conspiracy theories about it. With the reach that he has and the fact that he and the Saudis own this thing, and that was blasted out to all of his followers and to the world. We're not even in an age of reality at that point.
Well, to his credit, he took that down. I don't see Republicans running for the Congress or governors and many other different positions taking down their violent ads, or I don't see them, curbing their rhetoric. You played something from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is, calling for the death because of treason for Speaker Pelosi. The level of just plain crazy, violent hate rhetoric coming out of Republicans. You played something from the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona. I want viewers, I want voters to stop and ask themselves, would we trust somebody who is stirring up these violent feelings, who is pointing fingers, scapegoating, making a joke about a violent attack on Paul Pelosi? Why would you trust that person to have power over you, your family, your business, your community? So I want to take this a step further away from the incident, that terrible incident with Paul Pelosi, and broaden it out, because what we have with the rhetoric coming from the Republican candidates from their party right now is so disturbing. I didn't see a big outpouring on the part of elected officials to stand with Nancy Pelosi the way she has stood with Republicans as well as Democrats in times of real terror, like on January the 6th. And so ask yourselves, please, why would you entrust power to people who are either themselves unable to see how terrible it is that someone would be attacked in their home, or don't really care because they think it will somehow get them votes that will get them elected? This is a real threat to the heart of our democracy.
In fact, if Kevin McCarthy were to become speaker, it's very likely that Marjorie Greene would get a gavel, that she would get a committee, that people like Lauren Boebert would get committees, that people like Matt Gaetz would be on committees, perhaps committees dealing with national security, because he would have to appease them in order to get enough votes to be speaker at all. Are you concerned that maybe voters are not putting those pieces together, that having a Republican House would mean that the people you're talking about would be even more empowered, that faction would be in power?
Well, I think with all of the noise that we've got in this election season, I don't think people are able to really grasp that. But more importantly, I'm not sure they really understand the threats to their way of life. They may think that whoever's chairing a committee is, kind of abstract. But the Republicans in the House and others, like the chair of the Republican Senate Campaign Committee, are on record saying that they are going to put Social Security and Medicare up for a vote. Now, I don't understand why every American, not just people eligible for those two programs that they have paid into, that they have worked hard for, that they have earned, are not up in arms. We've got lots of problems right now in our country. We need sensible people to come together to try to solve them. The last thing we need is to make life even harder for the vast majority of Americans, because it's not just seniors who would have Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block. It would be their children and their grandchildren who would have to step in to fill the hole that would be left by this reckless behavior, this ideological action that the Republicans are promising to take. So there's a whole range of issues. And, sometimes when I tell people that, they say, oh, they would never do that. Well, they told us for 50 years they were going going to get rid of Roe v. Wade and turn abortion over to the states, where state legislators, local political officials could decide what your health care would be, why wouldn't you believe them that they are going to go after Social Security and Medicare? I believe them. I take them at their word. You've got everybody, wondering whether it's true. Well, listen to them and watch what they have done and what they say they're going to do.
Throughout the 2016 campaign, Donald Trump would use "lock her up" as a call and response to his audience about you. Michael Flynn would repeat it. I can remember being in the convention in Cleveland, and it was guttural, the amount of rage directed at you personally. It felt very personal. When you look at where we've come since then, to where Donald Trump's ideology has now taken full root in the Republican Party. Carrie Lake laughed at Paul Pelosi, an 82-year-old man being beaten and concussed by an intruder. And that is now just standard. Are you concerned that our democracy is not going to be able to hold past what you can only describe as fascism, violent politics, and demand for power without elections?
Well, I hope that voters really rally in this last week before the midterms to understand fully what's at stake, to not get diverted. Like I said, the Republicans have been talking about nothing but crime. Then when a crime is committed against Paul Pelosi, they could care less. These people do not really believe half of what they say. I served for 8 years in the Senate. I know a lot of the people who are still there, and I don't recognize them. And I do know they know better than what they're talking about, but they think that they need to be part of this, right-wing move that is unfortunately taken over the Republican Party. So we have a week for people to focus. If you have a candidate in your state who laughs about an 82-year-old man being hit with a hammer in his own home, there's something wrong with that person. Why would they want you to laugh with them about a crime? If you have someone running who voted in the House, as the vast majority of the Republicans did, to, turn back the clock on women's rights, to turn back the clock on Social Security and Medicare, then why on earth would you vote for that person? So let's clear away the smoke and the noise and try to focus on what's in your interest. The Republicans have talked a lot about inflation. They've done nothing about it. It's President Biden who has gone after, corporate profits that seem to be way out of whack, particularly for the energy industry, the oil and gas companies. It's President Biden who is trying very hard to inject new energy into our economy, and it's working. Here in New York, where I'm talking to you from, two huge announcements that were in many ways promoted because the Congress, the Democrats, finally passed something called the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Republicans talk a good game, but they rarely do anything other than try to take away your freedoms, undermine the quality of our life, make our political discourse violent instead of bringing people together. Why reward that behavior? You have a chance between now and next Tuesday to send a very clear message. We want people who don't laugh at a hammer being hit on someone's head. We want people who will help us solve our problems, and we sure don't want anybody getting elected who's going to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block.
It is Wednesday, the 2nd of November of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Will no one? Well, speaking of lords and vassals or peasants, power to the people means giving Elon Musk money. Oh, yeah, like he doesn't have enough already. Well, when you make the Sauds your business partners, part of the contract is it can be dissolved with a bone saw. Just saying. Okay. If that's the glowing orb that you want to be associated with, well, you might have to pay the price. You might. And I don't know. Maybe Ellen thinks that he can buy his way out of it. I don't know. I just don't know. He's got other people he needs to answer to, actually. Tesla and SpaceX. And I wish, like Morning Joe and others, would stop this damn lie that Elon Musk has invented anything. He bought into these companies. Yeah, he might stand around with the engineers, but he is no engineer. He bought Tesla, all of their technology, and their engineers. He did the same thing with SpaceX. They were already established companies. They just needed an influx of bucks. And they got it from Elon Musk. So please, he's not an inventor. He's an entrepreneur. Or as I like to say, the heir to an apartheid blood emerald fortune, because he's not self-made. That's the other lie. Oh, he brought himself up from his bootstraps. Yeah, with the money from an apartheid blood emerald fortune. Jeez. He's doing such great things. Yeah, well, so did Ezra Pound, and he was an anti-Semite, too. So get off my, cloud. Yikes. No free lunch. No free tweets. That's the world we're going to be living in. Is that what we want? Speaking of free, shouldn't there be a rule about raising hiking the rates, the interest rates, 5 days before an election? I would hope that there would be a rule for that, but apparently not. Oh, God, I can't believe it. Oh, we're going to raise the rates right before the election, and people will be feeling it by Saturday. Thanks. Okay. I don't know why this came to mind when I was thinking of rate hikes messing up the election for the Democrats. But Bolsonaro's goons, I don't know why I made this association. It's like a blockade of sorts. And the reason I mention this is that Bolsonaro's goons down in Brazil at the election actually clogged freeways and off-ramps and streets that would go to polling places. Totally locked down like major thoroughfares. With what looked like maggot trucks, the big old kind. Except flying the Brazilian flag with a picture of Bolsonaro on it. Il Duce. Still wasn't enough to keep him from being ousted. Now, he has not officially conceded. But word is actually, why don't we save that, because we have that in the chef's table portion of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But I'm just saying, that particular article that we're going to go through did not mention this massive blockade in lots of different parts of Brazil. Coordinated. I know, and all a bunch of lone wolves. But have you noticed that all the lone wolves seem to howl at the same time and the same tune? Ow! All right. It's almost like they run in a pack and then go out and do things by themselves. Almost like that. Okay, the assailant in the Paul Pelosi attack, the assassination attempt on Nancy. And the reason I call it an assassination attempt is that by his own admission, he did not plan to kill Paul Pelosi. Unless Paul Pelosi resisted. Do you think for one moment that Nancy was going to be quiet? As soon as she opened her mouth and disagreed with this guy, he was going to smack her in the head. And we know it, and that's why it was an assassination attempt. Oh, it wasn't an assassination attempt. They were just going to kneecap her. Really? Do you think it really stops there, Paulie? Nope. Not when they put the Visqueen on top of the rug. Bring in a whole roll of Visqueen. Oh, we're going to put this plastic down on here in case anything drips. Okay. That's when you know you're not the made man. You've been made. According to, Goodfellas and everything else. So, it was an assassination attempt. Let's be clear about that. Now, he has pleaded not guilty, and I saw the interview with his public defender. And, this is standard. You file a not guilty plea, and then, you go from there. Your initial pleading generally is not guilty. You get that filed, and then it just gets the wheels going. Because it sure sounded like this veteran in the public defender's office has his work cut out for him, and part of it is probably negotiating some sort of plea. He pretty much admitted, the guy got caught dead to rights, as that was once said. Who talks like that anymore? Well, we do. And body cam footage from the cops, the 911 dispatch, Capitol Police security cameras, no one was monitoring. This is another thing that cracks me up. Do you really think that when businesses get their security cameras, that there's somebody at the other end at 80p looking at the camera the whole time? Hell no. They keep the thing running, and if you're lucky, they might be able to identify your murderer after the fact. Maybe. Because sometimes it's, really grainy, and you can't tell who that is. Sure looks like the same shoes Marjorie Taylor Greene's, same sort of arm swing, and the same kind of leg gait. But we just can't tell if it's her carrying the pipe bombs. So I'm just saying, security cameras are not going to keep you from being murdered. You'll be lucky if they can identify your murderer. Security cameras. I don't know. What are they keeping secure? Their moneyed interests. They don't care about your life. They want their money back. Do I sound cynical? I like to think that I sound, knowledgeable about the facts. That's right. No brag, just fact. Okay, well, Trump will not give up his taxes. John Roberts is helping him. Right, yeah, you don't have to give anything up until, we don't even have to start this thing until after the election. How do you like them apples, huh? Okay, and then they'll come out and say that it is wrong for us to question the legitimacy of their actions because they're a bunch of crooks. Partisan, bought-off crooks. Thank you, Leonard Leo. Why is that guy not in jail? If I was running the, the storming of the Bastille, Leonard Leo would, I think he'd be tried by a people's court, so to speak. Take him to the barricades. We'll figure out what to do with him there. Hey, play with fire. You never know what might happen. We used to say that one of the great things about our revolution and the French Revolution is that, we didn't have like mass murder and all that stuff, in the transition of power from monarchy to, something more representative. And I was thinking, yeah, I guess. How long did the Revolutionary War go on? I mean, that skirmish lasted for, more than the few years at the end. Just saying. Okay, well, we could go far afield, but we did take time to curate a show for you last night, and we might as well go over what we have curated for you today. Of course, the top clip is always, I try to keep it fresh, so if I can get it fresh, I will. Otherwise, it's, from last night's newscast, and that's what this one was. And it was the great Hillary Clinton, and she told us so, and if only more of us had listened. A lot of us did, but we were pilloried because we wanted Hillary to win. Boy, think how different it would have been. Think how different it would have been with Gore, too. Everybody forgets about Gore. But regardless, Hillary told us what would happen, and it all is happening. Well, she did ask, why would you trust somebody who jokes about the violent attack on Paul Pelosi? And she was talking about that Nazi dominatrix, Carrie Lake. Yeah. Carrie Lake does, I'm telling you, she does affect the Nazi dominatrix behavior and look. I mean, the meme. I mean, she's got that down. Some people find that, I don't know, attractive. Eee. On the rest of the menu, in another bonehead move, Musk has Twitter working on a paid video feature that raises potential copyright and scam concerns. Toxic metal pollution is 10 times worse in racially segregated communities. And that's another I told you so moment. And Alabama voters will decide whether to ratify a new constitution that strips out the document's Jim Crow era language. And the complaint will be, you're taking away our heritage. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Norway raised its military alert level after suspicious drone sightings put the country on edge. And Brazilian President Bolsonaro's administration signaled a willingness to hand over power 2 days after the election loss to Lula da Silva. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. And of course, she does much more than just monitor the chat room. So thank you for everything that you do, Kelly. If you would, out there in radio listening land, take a gander. Like I said, who talks like that? Well, we do. If you would take a gander to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is the link to our Patreon site. And we could use a few more Patreons of Netroots Radio. Now, if you could afford, I know in these recessionary times, it's price gouging. Well, we're not trying to gouge you at any point here, but the costs of running this powerhouse of resistance keeps going up. And if you could maybe afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could afford to send that to us once a month, we're able to put those dollars to good use with other dollars, and we need more of them. But once you pay your bills, we're still able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance, as I mentioned, against the dark forces arrayed against representative democracy, not only here in the United States of America, but around the world. And boy, we get Benjamin Netanyahu back, I guess. But so far, we kicked out Bolsonaro and Lula's coming in, so we'll figure out maybe if there's a balancing act here and what's going on in world events. At any rate, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and he takes care of a lot more than just the Twitter feed. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And, of course, you know that's where the real reportage is. Don't take my word for it, because usually what I do, and you know what I do, okay, it's a launching point, and then we go. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And I should mention, because I haven't for a bit, that you can find the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library shows over all these 11 years, going on 12, by the way, at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Look for Netroots Radio. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Don't think that we're advocating some sort of terrible demise among the priesthood. No, it's a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce that we're able to do here in the Manhattan style, I should confess. Nonetheless, this first offering comes out of the Washington Post by Will Oremus and Garrett Divinick. Elon Musk Twitter is pushing ahead with plans to charge for content, including videos, on the social media site. Twitter is working on a feature that would let people post videos and charge users to view them, with the company taking a cut of the proceeds. And that's according to an internal email obtained by the Washington Post. The company appears to be aiming to rush out the feature, referred to as paywalled video, with a target of 1 to 2 weeks before launch. But the team has identified the risk as high, according to the email, which was sent by an employee on Twitter's product trust team. You know, the one that Alan is trying to dismantle. We don't want trust here. We want a hellscape. The email cites risks related to copyrighted content, creator-user trust issues, and legal compliance, and says the feature will undergo a brief internal review on those issues before moving forward. Whether the feature was in development before Musk took over is unclear, and Twitter declined to comment. But the accelerated timeline gives the company's internal review teams just 3 days to provide feedback on the potential risks. Ajasa of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Racially segregated communities in the United States are exposed to airborne toxic metals at a rate that's nearly 10 times higher than more well-integrated areas, according to a new study that was published yesterday, Tuesday. The study, published in Nature Communications, also found that highly segregated locations were exposed to 2 times the degree of total air pollution of well-integrated communities. It has long been known that communities of color bear a disproportionate burden of pollution, but the study puts a finer point on it, documenting that people in segregated communities breathe much higher levels of certain toxic heavy metals. In the study, researchers analyzed data showing that not all air pollution is created equal, said Jack Kodros, lead researcher on the study and previously an environmental scientist at Colorado State University. The main thing that we found was that the individuals in racially segregated communities are not only breathing a higher concentration of total particulate matter in air pollution, but they're also breathing a form of what pollution that is more concentrated in toxic and carcinogenic metal components, Kodros said. Environmental justice advocates were not entirely surprised by the findings, given the nation's long history of discriminatory housing and development practices, which have forced people of color to live near polluting facilities, freeways, and other sources of toxic pollution. But the study buttresses the need to correct past inequities, said one advocate from the NAACP. We now have an opportunity to invest significant federal funding into communities like black communities that experience this harm the most, said Aubrey Connor, the NAACP's Director of Environmental and Climate Justice, We must continue to center black communities and communities of color in any solutions and investments regarding environmental injustices. Chandler of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Alabama Constitution, approved in 1901 to entrench white supremacy, still has language regarding segregated schools, poll taxes, and bans on interracial marriage. But a seismic change could be in store. Alabama voters on November 8 will decide whether to ratify a new constitution that strips out the Jim Crow-era language. It would also reorganize the unwieldy governing document, which has been amended 978 times and tops over 400,000 words. The Public Affairs Research Council of Alabama says the size makes it the longest such document in the world. Voters in 2020 authorized state officials and lawmakers to cut the racist language that lingers from the era of racial segregation. That work, finally completed, now goes back before voters to ratify the Alabama Constitution of 2022. Proponents say the changes that will demonstrate Alabama is a different place today and streamline the sprawling Constitution to be more user-friendly. However, it does not make the policy changes that some reformers have sought, such as giving counties more home rule and removing tax earmarks, which dedicate taxes to a specific program or purpose. To approve this measure, the voters must vote yes on the question, asking whether to ratify the Constitution of Alabama of 2022. The ratification question will appear on the ballot after a list of candidates for office. There is also a separate amendment, Amendment 10, to authorize the Code Commissioner to remember and nest the newest amendments within the Constitution. The framers of the 1901 Constitution were direct about their goal to maintain a government controlled by whites. All right, I guess they'll call that critical race theory if you teach it, so let's do it. Let's teach it. And also, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, when you can't make good movies about good people. Once again, the DC Cinematic Universe hates their heroes. They hate their be good, don't kill moral stances and wish they were more savage. That's why the real villains in their movies are their heroes, like Superman and Justice League. At Marvel, with great power comes great responsibility. At the DCU, with great individual power comes an oppressive threat to the freedoms of the weak and to the great power of the government. That's why their better movies are about their antiheroes and their best are about their villains. And so Batman gets more broken and dysfunctional, with the Riddler being his last movie's real star, and Suicide Squad, and structurally racist and anti-Semitic, let's turn a mass murderer into a messiah figure Joker. So Black Adam also suffers from this hero is stupid/dangerous bias, as well as the same problem as Harley Quinn and Birds of Prey. If you want a Justice Society movie, do that. If you want a Black Adam movie, the same. But here they feel like different tones forced together, and I get they're supposed to present that moral stance conflict between hero and kill-friendly liberating champion. But since the DCU creators can't write the hero's viewpoint as anything but stupid, they treat the conflict superficially at best. Add on to that, the kid who's the back-talking, skateboarding, fanboy, Scrappy-Doo eventual hostage heart of the film, his fat, funny uncle, and his hot mom who's a university professor and concerned for her people except, oh psych, all I care about is my son, and you're like, oh, it's also that kind of movie. Also, it's the kind written, 2 out of 3, by the dominant social group, so that Black Adam's rage from having been enslaved under a dictatorial, exploitative regime and his guilt from his passive hopelessness leading up to his family's execution make his defining character flaw, rather than being a natural sympathy-inducing reaction to that trauma. Ugh. At least there's the first Wonder Woman, and every Black Adam fight scene with The Rock is beautiful. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Wouldn't it be great if life came with a remote control? You know, you could hit pause when you needed to, or hit rewind, like that time you knocked down that wasp's nest.
Uh-oh.
Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. To learn your risk, take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Arthritis is common among veterans. Traumatic and overuse injuries during active duty are risk factors for developing arthritis. Fortunately, there are low-cost or no-cost strategies that can help veterans manage arthritis. Physical activity can reduce pain and improve function. It can also help improve mood and play a role in managing other chronic conditions, such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. You can do low-impact activities, such as walking, biking, swimming, and water aerobics, all good forms of exercise. Arthritis-specific classes can help you get started. Information on classes, exercise programs, and tools are available at cdc.gov/arthritis. These resources can help reduce pain and improve function. Learning self-management techniques can help all veterans become more active, improve their overall quality of life, and thrive.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Although we haven't even gotten through this year's midterm congressional elections, it's still not too early to start examining some of the characters who hope you will make them president in 2024. I know you don't want to, but we must. That's because corporate elites have already chosen their favorites, and they intend to use massive sums of money, lies, more money, PR slickum, and even more money to slide their toady into the Oval Office, hoping you don't discover until it's too late that their chosen one really is a toad. Take Ron DeSantis. The GOP's far-right, power-hungry, narcissistic Florida governor promises to be the next Donald Trump, only more effective and not as nice. For example, his favorite gubernatorial hobby is the Orwellian practice of monitoring and censoring people's speech and thoughts, culling out ideas he deems objectionable. Don't say gay is his most infamous dictate to the state's teachers, but he has also outlawed any teachings that might, quote, denigrate the Founding Fathers. Nor will he tolerate the study of institutional racism in America. Indeed, he has even mandated that social studies textbooks, get this, must not include concepts of social justice. Ron adamantly opposes what right-wingers call a woke society. He wants one that's asleep, sound asleep. He recently rallied his right-wing cadre to ban some math textbooks. Yes, math. They screeched that some real-life topics like wage disparities are being used to make math problems relevant to today's students. So it was Fahrenheit 451 for those books. Thus far, DeSantis' censorship binge has nixed 42 math books for, quote, incorporating prohibited topics. This is Jim Hightower saying, did I mention that DeSantis is also forming his own gubernatorial military force? A state army he can deploy in emergencies. What's an emergency? He says he'll decide.
What is question 4? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Last July, the Massachusetts legislature overwhelmingly voted for the Work and Family Mobility Act, a law that allows qualified Massachusetts residents to apply for a driver's license regardless of their immigration status. Before driving, the law requires the license applicant to be trained, tested, licensed, and insured. The law will allow immigrants without status to make essential trips to work, to get their kids to school, to medical appointments, and to the grocery store. Similar laws already exist in 17 other states, many of which have experienced measurable improvements in road safety. After all, in case of an accident, it's important that all parties have insurance and proper identification. One reason this law, this public safety measure, is supported by a majority of district attorneys and sheriffs and major city police chiefs. But after the law passed, an opposition group gathered enough signatures to put the issue on the ballot this November. The fourth question on the ballot is, should the law be retained? Please don't be confused by the wording of question 4. Voting yes will keep the law in place. And remember to turn the ballot to the back. That's where question 4 is printed. That's where you can vote in favor of both human rights and public safety by voting yes on question 4. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1928. That was the day that police shot at protesting union workers at Prince's Pier in Melbourne, Australia. 3 union workers were injured, 1 fatally. Each day, the workers on the wharf had to muster or gather and hope to be picked for a job by one of the shipping companies. The practice often led to corruption and inconsistent work for the men. The Waterside Workers' Federation Union sought an end to the hiring method. The union had been formed in 1901 to represent workers on the waterfront in response to the dangerous and often brutal working conditions workers toiled under. The ship companies were determined to undermine the union's influence. They had the support of conservative Prime Minister Stanley Bruce. And on this fateful day, armed police brought in non-union workers to Prince's Pier. 1,000 union workers lined the docks to protest against this scab labor. Skirmishes broke out between the police and union workers. The police fired into the crowd. One of those bullets found the neck of Australian World War I veteran Alan Whitaker. Whitaker, like many men, had returned to Australia after the war, seeking work on the docks. It took 3 excruciating months for Whitaker to die from his wound. The shooting was declared justified. In 2010, a group of local historians and union members organized to look further into the case. An article published in the Sydney Morning Herald under the headline, "The Truth Was the First Casualty of the 1928 War on the Waterfront." It concluded the original investigation had been a whitewash. Whitaker's story, like those of workers who died fighting for dignity at the workplace, is up to us to uncover, pass on, and remember. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we have a rain and snow showers this morning. I think the snow will be at a higher elevation than we are here at the mothership. Only a couple hundred feet because we had quite a dusting in the ridges yesterday. And it looks like it'll be mainly rain showers for the afternoon with highs only around 45. Winds light and variable, and it looks like we might get about a quarter inch of rain. Mostly cloudy skies tonight with lows in the mid-30s. Winds will remain light and variable. And then cloudy early tomorrow with partial sunshine expected late. Highs near 50. So from the mid-40s to the 50s. Winds light and variable. And then rain coming in again on Thursday night, Friday morning. Ragweed pollen is low right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 31 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 72 and fair. Kyiv is 50 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 52 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 with a light rain shower and wind. Tokyo is 60 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 52 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and partly cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay. And New York, is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Francis of the Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Norway, a NATO member that shares a 120-mile border with Russia, raised its military alert level, citing Russia's war in Ukraine after suspicious drone sightings put the country on edge. Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre maintained there was no immediate threat in Norway, but said Europe was facing its most serious security policy situation in decades. The change in military alert level includes some troops spend less time on training and a heightened focus on maritime surveillance, Norwegian Defense Minister Bjorn Arild Gram said. Watching over the North Sea and protecting oil and gas installations is a high priority, Graham told reporters. Norway's Home Guard, a rapid mobilization force, will also boost its presence, officials said without elaborating about the security measures. The drone sightings in recent weeks prompted a Norwegian intelligence investigation and the detention of at least 7 Russians, including the son of an associate of President Vladimir Putin, for flying drones or taking photos in certain zones. The unmanned aerial vehicles were reported around Norway's airports, its offshore oil and gas fields, which are a pillar of the country's economy.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Mauricio Savarese and Diane Gentet of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazilian President Bolsonaro's administration signaled a willingness to hand over power 2 days after a nail-biting election loss to leftist Lula da Silva, and amid speculation the far-right incumbent might fight the result. Bolsonaro reportedly told members of Brazil's Supreme Court that his election battle against da Silva has come to an end. Earlier, in a brief speech at the presidential palace, he said, "I have always played within the 4 lines of the Constitution," although he stopped short of conceding. After a private meeting with Bolsonaro, Supreme Court Justice Edson Fachin said the conservative leader had said it is over, so let's look ahead. The justice made the comment in a video broadcast on local media. 2 other justices questioned by journalists declined to comment on the tenor of the hour-long meeting. Brazil's economy minister, Paulo Guedes, was also present, but did not comment. In a subsequent statement, the the top court said the justices told Bolsonaro during the cordial and respectful meeting that it is important he recognize the election's results as well as the Brazilian people's right to freedom of movement. The country has seen widespread gridlock as pro-Bolsonaro protesters block highways. Earlier, in his first public comments since results came in, Bolsonaro did not concede, but immediately afterward, his chief of staff told reporters the conservative leader had authorized him to begin the process of handing over power. Bolsonaro, who before the election had repeatedly questioned the reliability of the country's electoral system, had little room for potentially rejecting the results. Well, good wins out after all. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.